I still say nearly 20 years, but Anne Marie and I did the math, and I guess I now have 20 years of experience since we met about 20 years ago now, and was grateful to have this opportunity to talk about Season of Creation, what our Catholic faith calls us to do, and why it's so important that this is a way that we live out our faith, things that are very important to me. And I am now working within a scientist organization, Union of Concerned Scientists, but still very involved in this. And I am here in my personal capacity today. I just have to give that little disclaimer too. But yeah, so you've already heard a little bit about me, and I want to talk about some of the work that we did. So when I worked at the Global Catholic Climate Movement, which is now called the Laudato Si movement, the goal was to spread action for care for creation, and most specifically climate change, throughout the church. And the church is beyond our own borders, right? This is something that we are doing globally. We are part of a global and universal church. And I wanted to share some pictures here because I think it's important for us to remember that. These are actions from all over the world that happened, some in Italy. This was a school strike in, I believe, Uganda. I apologize for not remembering exactly. And then a Caribbean climate walk that happened with church activities throughout the world. Right now, it can be really easy for us to get discouraged when we see some of the lack of climate action in the United States, and even within some of the things that happened with when we went to push the USCCB and the church here to do more. But I wanted to share this just to remind us that we are part of a global church, and there are amazing and wonderful things happening around the world. There really is fantastic action on climate change with students pushing for action within their schools, with parishes leading these wonderful, wonderful climate marches, with people planting trees and doing fantastic activities around the world. And a lot of that was inspired by Laudato Si. So Laudato Si came out in 2015 and was a landmark in Catholic social teaching. I think a lot of people here are probably familiar with it if you're coming to a talk like this on a Sunday and are part of the Care for Creation ministry. But I just want to mention it because it was something that was really kind of earth-shaking within the church because of how clearly it presented care for creation in accordance with all of the other pieces of Catholic social teaching. It was also an encyclical, which is a higher level of Catholic teaching than we'd had on care for creation before. So we've had speeches, we've had letters from bishops' conferences, we've had wonderful, wonderful statements from popes, but the encyclical really raised it to a new level. And the last part is that it also very explicitly talked about this because there was an intrinsic value in creation. So much of what the church had talked about before was this need to care for creation as part of our own healing, that it was something that we needed to do as humans as well. But Laudato Si really came from the prayer from St. Francis and came from this idea that, yes, there is a reason for us to care for creation's sake, as well as for our own sake, as part of the church. But as I mentioned, it was not the only piece of Catholic social teaching, and I really love to do a little bit of this history so we can remember how ingrained this is in our faith. One of the first statements is that in 1970, Blessed Paul VI called for a radical change in how we interact with the environment. This was really part of when there were a lot of environmental movements around the world, and he brought that into the church. Since then, there have been more than 50 official Catholic statements on care for creation. One of the first is This Land is Home to Me by the Appalachian Catholic bishops. It came out in 1972. And I mention it because I really encourage people, if you have a green team, to bring this reading in to a study group or just spend a day with it sometime, because it's an incredibly beautiful piece of work. It really is poetry and prayer written as a bishop's statement about why this is so integrated into the work that the Appalachian bishops are doing and what the land means to the people there. It's a fantastic piece. It's really unique in church writing, and I encourage everyone to spend some time with it if they can. And then Pope John Paul's first encyclical, Redemptor Hominis, also talked about how part of the call that we had as humans in living out social justice was caring for creation. We also saw numerous statements, as I mentioned, World Day of Peace statements, oftentimes integrated care for creation. And then Pope Benedict XVI, this is a little bit lost, but he was actually known as the Green Pope before Pope Francis was. He started the movement to get solar panels on the Vatican, which I also want to say, I think earlier this year, the Vatican became the first entirely carbon neutral country because we are being powered by solar panels. But that was kicked off by Pope Benedict. So even before Pope Francis was there with Laudato Si, this was an integral part of our faith. It also is situated in a long history of teachings from the church. And I have some examples here of how many of the early church fathers and mothers wanted us to see the glory of God through creation and really saw studying the world as part of the way that we knew God as well. So it's not just the care for creation, the celebration, as we heard in the beautiful song after communion today, right? Of how many things are praising the Lord, the birds, the springs, the forests are praising the Lord. And seeing this care for creation is something that delights God. But also from St. Augustine, and this is something that Hildegard of Bingen said as well, is that in order to really know God, we had to know creation. So not just the ethical part, but even the scientific part of this is essential. It is part of how we understand the world around us and knowing the Creator through knowing creation. And all of that really led to this movement for the season of creation. It began for just one day of prayer. It actually came from the Eastern Orthodox Church on September 1st. It spread to an ecumenical celebration that lasts through the Feast of St. Francis on October 4th, and the Catholic Church officially adopted it when Laudato Si came out. We do still need to spread the word. There's been a huge increase in events like this, and churches recognizing the season of creation and having talks, having masses, having tree plantings, prayer gardens, anything that really gets us to understand creation. But that was a big part of what I did when I was working with Global Catholic Climate Movement, was getting more and more churches, dioceses, schools involved, and pushing for this Mass for Creation, which we just saw from Pope Leo. And we're so excited that was offered. Do you want to have that in English and around the world? And really wonderful to see that that's being done here at Holy Trinity. The season of creation, each and every year, has a theme. Just like the World Day of Peace does, or other parts of the church, there's a theme to help us really focus what we'll be studying and thinking about during that season of creation. And peace with creation is the theme this year. And it comes from a real focus on this scripture reading in Isaiah that talks about when we are absent from God, things are deserted, and then we are with God, and when there is justice and peace and righteousness, we do see the world being healed as well. That the desert becomes a fertile field, the fertile field seems like a forest, and the fruit of righteousness will be peace, right? People will be in peaceful places, in secure homes, and undisturbed places of rest. And this idea, as we've seen from some of the church teachings, that peace with God and peace with creation are one of the same, and this is one of the ways that we see God's glory reflected, is if we do have a healthy world, a healthy earth, a healthy ecosystem. And again, this is something that is very biblical, is throughout it in other texts in the Bible. And this is something, again, that I really like walking through. There's sometimes this idea that carefree creation is really new. We just had in 1970 the first official statement, but the idea of being one with creation and being part of the earth is something that has gone throughout not only our Catholic teaching, but also the biblical texts. What we see over and over again is that when God has placed rules down, it does not only speak to humans, it also speaks to all of creation. Creation honors the Sabbath as well, right? When we're resting, we're not supposed to work our donkeys either. But also the covenants were made with all of creation, not just with us. And so we need to recognize that God sees creation as intrinsically valuable and worthy of making a covenant with. So we need to recognize that value as well. And then again, that the earth belongs to God, right? That the land is not sold in perpetuity. We are just tenants here, so we're not the controllers. There's always this strain that you hear of people saying, no, we were given dominion over the land. but we were asked to be caretakers. And it's clear throughout that we are not the owners, that we're not the controllers, that we cannot just do whatever we want with this gift that we've been given of creation. We're tenants, we're here, we're caretakers of the garden. But we do have rules of what we need to be doing. And throughout the Psalms, we see again, as we heard in the songs at church today, that creation rises up and cares for the Lord. That his hand is in the depths of the earth, the mountain peaks belong to him, the sea is his, and his hands formed the dry land. But what we see now is that we've really disordered this. It's no longer the case that the foundations of the earth and the sea are controlled only by what God put down. It's also being controlled by the actions that we're taking. When we are increasing the heat and leading to sea level rise, if we are adjusting the flow of rivers, which is adjusting the land at the end, if we are changing where mountains are, if we are changing the normal seasons that we see, that is really disordering this, and that is why it's so important that we come back to looking at what we are doing and what we're called to change. So while Season of Creation and Care for Creation really look at the whole of things that we need to be thinking of in the environment, I want to talk today a little bit about, mostly about climate change and what that impact is. Because it's the greatest threat that we see, not only to our own lives and to humanity, but also to creation currently. So I imagine here that everybody knows the basics. If you don't and you have more questions about it, you can interrupt now or you can ask at the end. But I wanted to go through this again. You can tell I really like talking about the history of things. And I like talking about the history of things again because even with this, it's something that people think is brand new, right? This is something that just came up. This is a climate hoax. This is something that people just started talking about in the 80s. We don't really know what the science is. But the truth is, with climate change as well, this is something that we've known about for a long time. The greenhouse effect, that there were different chemicals that when put in, and gases that when put into the atmosphere in a closed area could trap heat and increase the heat in that area, was actually first discovered or theorized and then proven by Eunice Foote in 1856. So we have well over 170 years now of knowing that this is the way things are. It was popularized and proven further in 1897. Svante Arrhenius is actually a Scandinavian guy, so at the time he thought this was really great. He was like, when we're burning all this coal from the Industrial Revolution, we're going to increase the climate, we're going to be able to grow more crops here. He said it was a good thing back then. We know it was a little wrong, although we still hear that argument sometimes. But again, this is something that we've known about for a long time, that it was occurring here. The modern discussions on climate change really started about midway through the century. If you go back even to the 1950s, you can see headlines talking about potential climate change, about heat waves that might have been caused by climate change or extreme weather events. So this is something that's been discussed for a long time. And then the real political discussions happened in the 80s as well. So the greenhouse effect also is real. We know this. There is no debate or discussion about whether the greenhouse effect itself is real. The discussions happen about whether we're changing it. But the fact that there are gases in the atmosphere that have increased the heat, there's no dispute about that. It's actually what makes the Earth livable. If we didn't have any sort of a greenhouse effect, we would be like some of the planets like Mercury that don't have an atmosphere. They're burning in the day, they're freezing at the night. We need this general idea of the greenhouse in order to keep us at a livable temperature. Average about 59 degrees Fahrenheit. It's actually a little higher now, it's about 60, 61, but keeping us warm is important. So I just want to say that as well. Like the basic science of this, is there's no dispute. The discussions that even happen from people that are trying to say that we don't need to do anything is whether we're changing it, but we are. The amount of CO2 has been steadily increasing. Now it's a little over 400 parts per million, which is about 140 or so higher than we were for all of human history before. We know that carbon dioxide has this effect. We know that the greenhouse effect is real. I'm always confused how people could say that increasing it whether increasing it has an effect is up for debate, because we know that it really is having an impact. And we see that in the historical records. Every year since 1956 has been warmer than 1956. Every year since 1976 has been warmer than 1976. Every year since 1992 has been warmer since 1992. So any college student today has only experienced a world that is warmer than the entire rest of human history. They have never experienced a year that would have been average for most of us in our childhood. The 10 warmest years on record are the last 10 years. And that's something that I want to emphasize. We have seen the impacts of climate change starting to speed up. We used to see these things that would go up and down. So you can see the records changed, right? There would be a while in between them. The last 10 years are the warmest 10 years. And I believe it is 22 of the 25 warmest years are since 2000. So there's a bit of a snowball effect happening where things are getting warmer and warmer, faster and faster. 2024 is the warmest year on record. It's also the first time that we went above 1.5 degrees Celsius higher than the average temperature for the past few hundred years. And that's a really important landmark. 1.5 degrees Celsius is what was listed in the Paris Climate Agreement as sort of what we needed to stay below. And going over it 1 year does not mean we've exceeded it permanently, but it was a wake-up call for a lot of people that do climate work to say this is starting to happen faster than we expected, and is putting us in a very serious place. We also see the impact in extreme weather. One of the things that's difficult is you can't point to any one storm, right? You can't say, this hurricane, we can say that this one came from climate change. You can't do that for any one storm or any one extreme event. But you can look at the trend. You can see that storms are increasing and are becoming stronger, and you can compare that to what we modeled and what we expected to see, and see that it's lining up, that we are seeing the impact here through hurricanes, through extreme weather, through extreme storms. We can also see it in heat waves. So this is sort of a record of European summers based on the average. And 23 of the 30 most extreme heat waves ever in Europe have happened since 2000, in the last 25 years. According to the climate models that came out decades ago, global warming is going to increase the number of extreme heat waves. It's going to double it in places that are prone to it, which is what we've seen. That they're twice as likely to happen, and when they happen, they last longer and they're hotter. We also see that the sea levels are increasing. So low-lying Pacific islands are specifically at risk. Many of the countries in Oceania are actually making plans for how they're going to take care of their people as the sea levels continue to rise, as flooding during high tides becomes more prevalent, as storms are more of a threat. So the island of Kiribati, for instance, has purchased land from Fiji in order to grow their crops so that they can still have some people living in the higher areas and then people working in a different country. A couple of the others are trying to work out deals with New Zealand and Australia as places for their people to go, and even maybe maintain a sovereign nation if their islands become flooded. And then, of course, we see a huge increase in wildfires as well. So this is from 2023. I don't know who was here in the summer of 2023 when our sky turned orange, which had not happened before during the 20-some years that I'd lived here. I'm not saying it's never happened, but this is a picture of during the day. And it's certainly something that stuck in my mind, that smell coming into the house and looking outside and seeing a sky that looked like this. So if that's the case, why is there any dispute? I want to say, first of all, there's not nearly as much dispute as people that have money in fossil fuels would like us to think. Most people actually do acknowledge that climate change is happening. There's a wonderful survey called the Yale Climate Survey that tests just people's opinions on climate constantly. And a majority of people in every single congressional district in the nation think that climate change is real and that humans are influencing it. Sometimes it's a small majority, but it is a majority. It's over 50% in every county. What is interesting, though, is that in most places, people do not think that other people think climate change is happening. So they think that there's still a lot of dispute about it, and there's not. They think that other people in their county don't agree with them, right? But that's not the case. There really is a majority of people who recognize that this is happening. But it's not 100%, and even some of us that do recognize that it's happening can miss some of the extremities of it. So this is one of my favorite explainers for why we don't all realize the emergency situation we're in of all time. This is a great comment called XKCD, and I'll give people a minute to read it. But the general sense is we're adaptable, right? We get used to things. So, like I said, people that are in college right now, or are college aged, right? They've never experienced a year that's normal. So what do they have to compare it to? And even those of us who have, if this has been our life for 20 years, with the warmest years on record for the last 20 and 25 years, it's easy to forget the way things used to be. So we adapt, and we don't realize that all of the things that we were worried about happening in 1970, 1990, and in 2000 are happening now because we're going about our lives and things feel normal. So what can we do? And I'm going to say I had a little bit of trouble putting this together because your parish is doing great. You're doing a lot. I feel like the things I'm going to say about how we can change this everybody's going to be like, yep, we know, we've got it. But I'm still going to go through some of the things that we can do because there really is a lot of hope. There's a lot of danger. We're seeing things get worse and worse, but there's still a lot that we can do. And as I go through this, I want to mention again those pictures I shared at the beginning of climate events from around the world. None of us are responsible for doing this on our own. No parish is responsible for doing it on their own, and not even any country is responsible for doing it on their own. We can all make change in our own lives, and we all can do what we can, but we're part of a global movement. We're part of things that are happening around the country. So even when we do get discouraged about the limits that we have or what's happening here, we can continue to support things that are happening internationally, and we can continue to support our brothers and sisters who are with us together in this globally, because every piece that is happening, every ton of carbon dioxide that doesn't go into the atmosphere is a ton that doesn't go into the atmosphere, and it is a good thing. And there's a lot that we can do. So, what can we do here? And I want to make sure there's time for questions, so I'll go through. But in our homes and in our families, eat less meat. This is actually one of the most impactful things you as an individual can do. It's cut down on your meat consumption. And what I love about it when I am talking at parishes or part of Season of Creation is we have something built in, right? We can bring back the Friday fast. You can give up meat for all of Lent as something that makes it easier, but you can also just give it up one day a week. There's a movement called Meatless Mondays within the church. I think you can do it on Fridays if it works for you with your faith, but we have this built in. We already have some of these skills about consuming less, using less, being more humble, recognizing that we're not the be-all, end-all, and we need to be caring for all of creation built into our faith. Cut down on waste in your life, right? The fewer things that you're bringing in, the fewer products you're buying, the fewer products you're wasting, is a climate piece as well. Not only does it help the general environment, not only does it cut down on things that are going into a landfill or being burned if you're in a place that has an incinerator, but everything that is created takes energy in order to make it, in order to transport all of the pieces that go into it. So cutting down on waste is really impactful. Buy used if you can, reuse if you can, and again, limit the new things that are coming in. Cut down on your energy use. Use renewables if possible. That's not an option for everyone, but if it is an option, it's definitely something to look at and think about. And then I started and ended with the most important things. The next one is drive less. Drive electric if you can. Again, this isn't an option. I'm not telling everyone to go out and buy a new car, but transportation is actually the number one contributor to climate change in the United States. It's the biggest sector. With 28% of all of the greenhouse gases and global warming emissions coming from cars. And we're in a place that has transportation, the more we can cut down on trips that are using gasoline, the better. It's a huge, huge, huge impact. And again, in our personal lives, cutting down on meat and cutting down on our transportation emissions are two of the most impactful and relatively easy things that we can do as well. Like, it takes some thinking about it, it takes some change, but it's something that we can adapt to most of the time. What can we do in our church? Again, you're doing a lot. Solar panels, I walked through the St. Francis walk on the way in. It was wonderful to see. I just think you all are doing so much. It was hard to say what people should do, but I wanted to share some things which you also might be doing as well. So one is that there is a Laudato Si action platform. This is actually something else that I worked on at Global Catholic Climate Movement. We put this together, and it is something where you can go, you can log changes that you're making as an individual or as a church. Kind of shows you what other people are doing as well. It's a really great way to recognize that you're doing this in community with others, and to get tips and to help track additional things that you can change. Reusable items at events. If you were just always having disposable things, if there's the hospitality committee or the green team want to get together and make sure they're washing things, that's really helpful. Less meat at events. Divest and invest is something that institutions can do. And what that means is divest from fossil fuels, invest in green companies, green energy. So the Global Catholic Laudato Si movement also has pushed a lot of this divestment. We've worked with a lot of different dioceses on this. I do not believe the Washington Archdiocese has done it yet. So you can host a letter writing to the Washington Archdiocese. You can talk about this. You can talk about the importance of it. If your kids go to a Catholic school that has an endowment, you can look at this as well. But pulling our money out and reinvesting it is something that is helping to support the green economy is really valuable. It's something we can do as an institution, and it's something the Catholic Church actually has a really long history in, right? There's all sorts of rules about what our Catholic money can be invested in terms of pensions to go along with Catholic social teaching. And this hasn't made it on the list yet. So would love to see this just as something that's standard, that it's not something we have to worry about, but it's something that you can do as an institution. Preach and educate, do things like this, talk to your friends, right? Talk to your neighbors. Like I said, the idea that a lot more people think that climate change is happening, that think that other people think climate change is happening, is something that sticks in my mind constantly. So if you have friends, especially outside of Holy Trinity and outside of Washington, D.C., talk to them about this. Find ways to spread the word, find ways to preach and educate with others. And then join with other churches. So you mentioned you're already part of Interfaith Power and Light. There's also the Catholic Climate Covenant and the Laudato Si movement, where we're all doing this together. And then lastly, in our country. This is another one that's always tricky when I'm doing talks in DC, no matter the political environment, because I'm aware the representation isn't quite fair, but there are things that we can do. And it's really important to be involved in this as a political cause as well. If you think about some of the things that I mentioned, like using renewables, that's not always an option, and that's not something that we can make be an option as individuals. We can't all put a wind turbine or a solar panel on our house. You have to have that option for renewable energy. Even with driving less, that's a choice I can make because I live just outside of Washington, D.C. My parents live in Florida. They live as close to a grocery store as I do, but there's no sidewalk and there's a 6-lane road between them and the grocery store. So driving less is not an option for them. And that's something that can only be changed by getting involved in politics, right? That's advocacy. So we've also seen that the current administration is really rolling back a lot of the changes that were made. Currently, they've canceled numerous wind projects, canceled electric vehicle investment, ended all tax credits for clean transportation and clean energy, limited the ability of states actually to pass clean air policies. That was something that happened earlier this year. And just this week threatened tariffs for countries that I said force, I meant enforce emissions rules. So countries that are following some of the UN treaties on climate change and lessening emissions, the administration has said that they're going to start a new round of tariffs to punish countries for doing that. So we can do so much in our homes. This is going to have a bigger impact, so we need to be making sure that we're involved. So what can we do about all of that? We can take local action, right? Locally, you can advocate on zoning laws, you can advocate about traffic laws, you can make sure that there are choices that people can make. You can look at how schools and government buildings are investing in clean energy. You can try to make sure that every place that you do have, that you interact with that has any sort of that the government has, or that schools has solar panels, has renewable energy, has clean school buses, has clean vehicles. These are all things that we can do locally. Federally, there's still a lot that we can do. We can join mobilizations and protests. You can talk to people who are in other states and try to get them to advocate. And you can call other members and senators. This isn't something that is limited. You certainly have the right to go and talk to anyone in the federal government. And this doesn't need to be considered a partisan activity. Caring for creation, caring for the environment, caring for our home, making sure that we're healthy and safe is something that everybody should be caring on. So I'm interested in the issues. I know that the current administration has limited the impacts that we can do. But again, that doesn't mean that Congress has to rubber stamp everything. It doesn't mean that it has to be a partisan fight. There was a conservative climate caucus until this session that was taking action and was engaged, and we need them to come back together and step up and stand up to make sure that we are taking some of these actions. And then lastly, in terms of advocacy, there is actually currently a regulation on something called the endangerment finding. And what that is actually is it is something that the EPA put out a couple decades ago that says that greenhouse gases are a danger, that it does endanger us, and so they are able to regulate it through the Clean Air Act. It's trying to be rolled back. They're trying to eliminate the ability for the EPA to regulate any sort of greenhouse gases. And as part of that, actually a whole host of clean fuel rules that were put into place as well. There's a public comment period going on. There was actually just public testimony last week. It was really interesting to watch. About 892 people spoke up in favor of the endangerment finding. 16 people said they wanted us to get rid of it. Every one of them worked for an industry association. So there's a pretty big groundswell of support to keep this. And there's still public comments that can be written, and I understand that you'll have the opportunity next week. Do you want to say a word?
Yes, so next Sunday at the coffees, we're going to have an opportunity for you to write a note to the EPA, exercising your right as citizens, and I hope you will say, that's a crazy idea.
And yeah, so please come out next week to have that opportunity to make your voice heard and do a public comment on the endangerment finding. So lastly, to close out, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions, just want to make a plug for taking action and including this advocacy action with the story of Esther, which is one of my favorites. So the story of Esther is that she was chosen to be a Jewish queen in Persia after the previous queen was sort of angered the king, but she was selected. And in those days, it's not as if even as the queen and as the wife, she had a lot of rights to speak up and to speak to the king. However, what she learned was that one of the king's attendants had been angered by someone who was Jewish and was going to institute a massacre to kill off her people. And Esther, even though she didn't have the right to speak up, approached the king, and he invited her to speak. And she pled for her people, and she pled for him to make change and to put a stop to this. And he listened. And the reason she did it is that when she was talking to her father about how could she possibly speak up, how could her voice be heard, how could she speak before the king, what he said is that you are the only one who can, and you were made for a time such as this. And what if we are made for a time such as this? Even with the challenges that we see today, we still live in a democracy, in a place where we can make our voices heard and we can advocate, which does not exist in every single place. And the country that we're in, where we can still make our voice heard, is one of the greatest contributors to climate change and is impacting people who don't have the ability to speak up. and don't have the ability to make that change because they're not the ones causing the problem. We have so much power still if we exercise it. And we need to recognize that we are made for a time such as this, to speak up for what we believe. So thank you so much for letting me come. I think we have some time for questions.
If you have questions, Ashley has a microphone, and John, let me give you this one, just if you use this one, speak loudly. So please raise your hand, and we'll go back and forth.
While Ashley. While Ashley's getting the question, I just want, in the social justice e-letter, there's also an opportunity for you to comment on EPA. It's very easy, it's a nice little click. Here's a whole bunch of Catholic organizations who are doing it. So.
Hi, I just have one question about air conditioning.
Yes.
Which, we love in America. And as we all know, you go to a mall, whatever, they have the doors opening and the air conditioning is pouring outside. Has there been any research on the proper temperature, and if you lower air conditioning by 1 degree or something like that? Because I feel like if there was a campaign to turn your air conditioning to, let's say, 76, which is still comfortable, we're all comfortable with the outside temperature of 76, something like that. I mean, would this have a substantial impact?
So I don't know of research that shows the exact temperature that you should be at. I do know that air conditioning is actually a major contributor to greenhouse gases as well, both because of the energy that we use and also outside of the United States and some other countries, the coolant that's used is a very potent greenhouse gas as well. There's an effort to change that to make different coolants more widely available. So I appreciate the question. I also will tell you that in Laudato Si, air conditioning is actually very explicitly called out in one of the passages, talking about how in the wealthy countries we are putting our own comfort over the existence of others. So you're thinking in the right way. So I can't tell you the exact temperature or what exactly you can put it at. I can say to the extent that people can make it a little bit warmer in the summer and take it to be a little bit cooler in the winter, it does make a difference.
As far as the churches go, I noticed that in many churches, people are wearing coats in the summer.
Yeah.
So even if the Catholic Church could address that at what is a temperature which is considered,
Yeah, again,
I'm not an engineer, I don't know. But I mean, if the Catholic Church could lead a movement on that, we're not saying no air conditioning, but let's not have it where people are wearing coats.
Yeah, agreed.
You can email your pastor, Gillespie@trinity.org.
Thank you so much for this talk. I really appreciated the extra context and history. So I knew a lot of the other things, but that was it was helpful to see it in context. My question is, in your recommendations, most of them I understand, and the one I realized I actually don't know a lot about is the zoning and traffic laws for local advocacy. Can you just say a bit more about that?
Yes, I would love to, because this is a lot of what I do, and even before that was really involved in this. So when you look at the way as the city is put together and in your neighborhood, none of that sort of happens by accident. There are very, very strict rules about how things are zoned and what buildings can be put in different areas. And if there is a limit on what's called mixed use zoning, it means that you can't have walkable communities. If there's a limit to so if you have just residential in one area and then just one street has all of the buildings, right? Then that can limit how you can make things more walkable for people. The other piece of it is whether you can zone things for big box stores or encourage smaller family-owned businesses, which generally don't have a giant parking lot, are able to serve the community better, and just make a more walkable community, and give more options to people. The traffic laws and the zoning laws also really impact whether or not you can drive less. So getting involved in making sure that there are bike lanes is really important, making sure that there are safe bike lanes, making sure that you've done, it sounds so silly. These are little things that happen in local government that make a huge difference. So if you go on some streets in DC and there's just sort of like the bike lane, you're kind of with traffic, that's really dangerous. If you have the parking in the bollards and then the bike lane for people to go in instead of the bike lane and then the parking, it means that people aren't swerving in and out of the bikes, and it means that you can make it safer even for like kids. And then looking at speed limits also has a huge impact on how safe it is for people that want to drive less, and actually how much fuel is used if you decrease the speed in certain areas. So there's a lot of smaller things that can happen to make the communities safer. And if you think about it, like safer for kids to walk and drive to school, or walk and bike to school, or to see their friends and things like that as well. Like one of the biggest safety issues that I know we have in our family with a high schooler is whether or not he has to bike past the off-ramp for the highway, right? And so if we had an overpass or a stoplight, that would make a huge difference in feeling comfortable with decreasing our own driving. So it's all these little things that add up if you start getting involved in looking at the traffic and zoning laws. It's not like most exciting thing, it's certainly not as exciting as going to a big protest, but it's actually incredibly impactful if you can start to get involved in some of those local decisions. Sure.
Thank you so much, very informative. Since AIs emit a lot of greenhouse gases from data centers, I use ChatGPT for work all the time, but do you have any recommendations for like responsible use of AI?
I don't like to use it because for a whole host of reasons, including that it does take a ton of energy to produce. In Virginia, I believe it's 26% of our energy is now going to data centers. So it's really difficult to say. I think that it's here. I think asking how we can use it ethically is the best way to approach it. Probably looking at limiting how much, like thinking, is this a tool that's really going to make a difference at this time? If it is, use it just like everything else that we do. Like I don't say don't drive at all. I don't say never bring anything new into your house. It's like look at what you need, right? So if it's something that's really going to make a difference in that project, use it. If it's like a 3-sentence email, maybe just like hammer it out and don't worry if it's perfect. So I think we can try to identify when we need it. And then another piece is really going to go to some of these larger questions. If you do have any way to speak up to a company, if you're an investor and can write to the shareholder meetings or something to say, I want to make sure that you are still maintaining your climate commitments. That's really important because I think one of the things that I've been concerned about it is that we've seen corporations back off from their climate commitments because they say they can't meet those while they're building up the energy that they need for AI. So that's another place where it's probably going to come down towards advocacy, making sure that there's renewables that are an option for people that are using AI, and to the extent that you are able to speak up to companies or even just send a letter or a comment or something to them to say, like, we still need to make sure that we're meeting our climate commitments, it'll be really important.
On that note, are there any organizations who are leading that we should be tracking or?
It's a fantastic question. Not to my knowledge, I will tell you within the Union of Concerned Scientists, this is a really big and active discussion about what our recommendations are for any sort of policies for AI, how much we can use it to boost our sustainable commitments. It's a great question. It's something that a lot of places are looking at. I do not know of anyone who's taken it on with really strong recommendations at this point. I think it's all just so new and changing so rapidly. It's hard to get a handle on.
Hi. I worked actually on this land, so to me, I just wanted to organize it.
Thank you for your work. I do love it.
So many years ago, and it was in Stearns, Kentucky at
Yeah.
the time. But one of the things that I'm really interested in, I was out west recently, and I had a series of conversations with people that were interested in climate change. And one of the things that they said, and they talked about a lot, which I thought was really unique, was they said we should be using the word conservation. And they used conservation, you know, almost exclusively because it was a non-polarizing word, and it really has a lot of strength in that context. So I was just wondering if that's something that you've been, you know, talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about the terminology, and I think communities are going to have the best sense of what works in their community and should speak about it the way that is impactful and that is meaningful to other people. Conservation is also generally slightly different in like walling off certain areas, protecting certain areas. Some of the changes to dams and rivers and things like that out west fall under that conservation piece, whereas climate change also has a lot of changes that we need to make in our urban experience as well. So I would never tell anyone not to use the words that they're most comfortable with and that they think they're getting the best response with in their community. I also think it's important to say climate. I think it's important because of the statistics that I shared before, that people think that other people don't believe it's happening and don't care about it. And there's a lot of different groups that have backed off from it for exactly the reasons you're saying. Like, this is too polarizing. But I think it's really important for people that are in areas where people think climate is polarizing to hear that there are community members, not me from DC, right? Like, not someone else, but there are community members that care about climate change as an issue as well. Because otherwise I just think we keep seeing that spiral. So if they're trying to institute a particular policy, if they're trying to bring people in, like, again, I'm not going to tell people not to say it, but I think it's important to find ways to integrate that language as well so that it is something that's recognized. I'm going to let other people talk. Yeah.
Thank you for raising our awareness, and especially thank you for giving us lists of things that you can do instead of just lamenting what's going on. Everyone can do things in their own life.
Yeah.
And I'd like to contribute, not a question, but several things that can be done. They're being done right now anyhow, but you can adapt it in your own life. Very simple things, very inexpensive. First of all, make sure that every single light bulb in your house is changed to an LED. The amount of energy saved by doing that is enormous. LED bulbs have technologically advanced so that there's no problem with dimming and with all kinds of things. So please check to see if you have lights. Even your ceiling lights and everything, there are replacements for everything now. Do that. That's a good thing for the environment. The second thing is we talk about drive. We used to talk about drive electric, and that's an expensive proposition to buy an electric car. I have an electric car, but it's still expensive. There's an inexpensive thing you can do that every suburban person, you have lawn equipment.
Oh.
Your lawn equipment, I don't know if you realize that a gas power mower pollutes more than 10 cars. It's an enormous polluter. And to buy an electric power mower, an electric trimmer, and an electric hedge clipper, and things like that, relatively inexpensive, and it saves a lot for the environment. So those are two simple things to do. And finally, I'd like to make a comment I wasn't thinking about until we just brought it up. But data centers. Data centers, that as we know them, they have a lot of controversy. People are really up in arms for many reasons. But the data centers are dependent on the zoning. So when you're talking about zoning, and people have an involvement with their local communities, the zoning that you have to ask for data centers, and by the way, AI data centers are a different animal, and they're like 40 times as energy consumptive as regular data centers, which are already big energy consumers. But when you get a chance, or you find some way of getting involved in the zoning for data centers, there are simple things you can ask for, which are powerful. One is the data center has to produce its own electricity. It can't just say, we're willing to let Dominion Power provide us energy and we'll pay the bill. That's not the answer. It's they have to provide their own completely self-contained energy. They have to provide their own water and water recycling, and they have to contain the noise. Those are three things that citizens can ask their local communities to zone into the process for data centers.
Just two things. One, could you say a little bit more about meat? I always heard that it was beef, and you said meat, so if you could just unpack that, and then I have a follow-up question about the sites.
Yeah, beef is definitely the most climate intensive of all of the foods and the meat. So cut down beef would be, even before if you feel like you can't even go vegetarian on one day a week, cutting down on your beef consumption would be huge. So beef is the most, I believe it's lamb and beef, so those two red meats are the highest. Then is pork, then is chicken. Fish is sort of in this weird category, but it really depends on like how much you're transporting it. If you have wild caught shrimp that are local, that's going to be more or less okay. If you have farm shrimp that are being imported, that's going to have a huge impact. So fish is a little bit trickier to figure out. But all meat is hugely climate intensive for a couple different reasons. One is it takes a lot of land. Even if you have a concentrated feeding operation, you're taking a lot of land that is just being devoted to that. And even if you're growing things on it regularly, there's better carbon capture from that, both from the plants and the soil. The other piece is that it's really intensive in order to provide all of the resources to give the meat. So if you think about it, like 1 pound of wheat takes a certain amount of energy and water. 1 pound of, or several pounds of wheat turned into a pound of beef takes a lot more, both of the resources of making and harvesting the wheat and then transporting it. And then there's a ton of energy that goes into the transportation and into the packaging and all of that. It's not as if you're on a small farm, right, and everything's happening in just quick succession. So all meat has a larger climate impact than not eating meat. But to what you said, I should have brought a chart with me. Yeah, beef is like, if you're looking at a graph of climate impact, it's like lamb and beef, pork, chicken is relatively low compared to being vegetarian or eating pulses. Yeah.
And then could you just talk a little bit more about the greenhouse? Because it was fascinating to me. You said, okay, we need the greenhouse, but you know, everything in moderation type of thing. So it just kind of, where does the greenhouse need to be, and then how is it that the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is? Yeah,
so we naturally have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We have carbon dioxide that is released when we breathe out. When there's any sort of decaying matter, there's usually carbon dioxide that's released from that. And oxygen is actually a very small greenhouse gas, as is hydrogen dioxide, so water holds greenhouse in the atmosphere. Methane, which is found in a lot of different methane sinks in the ocean, but also can be released through volcanic activity, is a potent greenhouse gas as well. So the carbon dioxide is the one that we've been increasing the most, followed by methane, but there's a lot of different gases that create this greenhouse effect. And basically what they do, this is like my super short, simple, simplistic scientific explanation, is the way that these gases, when they're excited, they vibrate in such a way that they're holding the heat in to the atmosphere. So light can come in as heat, it warms everything up. These gases are holding it then in, akin to what you might see in a greenhouse, or if you're in a car on a sunny but cold day, right? The light comes in, it gets stuck, and then it gets stuck, and there is heat. So we produce naturally greenhouse gases, and we had a pretty stable atmosphere. It's actually gone through cycles. So we've seen at times when there's we can actually track that when there's been an ice age, there's been fewer greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Sometimes there is something that happens that releases a lot more when there's been like massive die-offs or things like that. For some of the mass extinction events, carbon dioxide has increased. We've seen it be a lot warmer. So there's always a little bit of a cycle. What's happened now is that we are taking tons and tons and tons of carbon that was pulled out of the atmosphere just via this natural cycle as plants grew. We're burning it, turning it into carbon dioxide, and putting it back up. So we've not only unbalanced what was there to keep this in a livable atmosphere, but we've done it in an incredibly rapid pace, which means it's nearly impossible for any of the living creatures, including us, to adapt to the change as we're seeing it. It's not that it hasn't been changed before, although this is actually very extreme, even looking through the historical records, but it's never happened at this speed because we're putting them in so fast. So in terms of where we need greenhouse gases, we actually need them everywhere, but we were in the Earth keeps itself in a pretty stable ecosystem. Like, it really is a miraculous place if you look at the different feedback mechanisms that have kept us at kind of the same level for millennia, right, for thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Sure.
We'll take one last question.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, the woman who mentioned the word conservation is gone, so I wanted to pick up on that again, but I'll just say language matters, and I'm wondering more specifically where climate change is in the minds of people who use the word conservation, right? I know there's a relationship, and my dad, who would be 104 now, but in Jimmy Carter, energy efficiency, he just took that right up because it made sense to use less energy back then, and the word was conservation. Yeah. So for his generation, conserve energy was the term. Having said that, I totally agree with you that climate needs to be in there because we're in such rapid craziness. I wanted to put a pitch in, if I might, for a group called, maybe people know about it, but Braver Angels. It's a group that was started in 2016, and what happens is people who have deep feelings and beliefs, who will therefore vote differently accordingly. Red, blue is how they divide it up. Thank goodness they have space for independence. Come together and have conversations. So if you had the word conservation in a Braver Angels debate, the whole conversation could roll out and have, well, what is climate change? What is conservation? Where do we agree? Where do we differ? And for me, I'm hoping that politically, it's a really interesting organization, and you can go to NES3, you can go to any of their work, but to work these things out, because people out west, they have very strong opinions for good reasons. They're stewards of the land, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Actually, Marisa's counterpart in Washington, D.C. called it global heating, not climate change. Marisa, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marisa, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. It was wonderful to have you here and to see you again. Delightful. Are you here for a couple minutes if people have questions? I know your family has been lovely and listening and patient.
A couple of minutes. This one has somewhere to be at 12, so I can stay for a few more minutes.
Okay,
but
so
then
if you had any individual questions, you can come up for a couple minutes. And please just look, there's a lot going on this month for the Green Team and Care for Creation. Ashley, is there anything in particular you want to highlight?
No, I think, if you let her read the bulletin, it's all listed there. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Your persona is so important. Just for us to see a mom, a mother. I do. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Do you often get to hear your mother speak?
No.
No. That's great. But it does do it an awful lot.
So I don't forget, she said to give this to you. I don't know if she said anything to you, but I guess we can.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Hi, Marisa. Did you work with Amy Willem Eshkevan? Because you were with the Global.
Yeah, yeah.
And Amy, she was with the Columbus.
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
okay,
Yeah, she's
okay.
wonderful.
Yeah. She was on my board, so. Do you have a card? that
So,
you-
I actually.
Here, let me
thank
just give you mine. So I have a few ideas I'd like to share with you.
Yeah,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
thank you very much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking.
Thank you for coming.
Did you bring a pen? Because I'm going to write my email down. I'm sorry. And then I'll let you go. Thank you.
You always bring pens.
I do always bring pens. So I already got a pen for him.
Hope you have room for a hug.
I do.
We've been here once before, actually, last year, and we haven't had that. It's kind of nice. And it's nice coverage.
Good job.
Fun, and I have to get back in touch with you. Okay, thanks for coming.
It's getting out there, but this is your heritage. Getting to do it out.
I love St. John's.
That is a heritage.
I think when you do it, I can wait to what happens. Recognize that
Can I use the microphone?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not choices.
But it looks like a toy.
But for those things,
Does Diocese Wellington have like an emergency plan or?
Why can't I use the microphone?
yeah, it does have a Care for Creation team from some of the other different officials.
Microphone. Mom, can I use the microphone? Testing, testing.
Thank you.
Testing, testing.
Your mom talks fast, right?
I try to slow down. I know I talk fast when I'm giving